Every year hundreds of thousands of people go missing. Naturally, the circumstances of their disappearances vary. We are well aware that unfortunately, modern underground organizations exist that are involved in kidnapping people for different purposes. These are things no news channel will openly talk about because it's a strict taboo. But thanks to the internet, information is leaking out more and more. In every country, there are sad statistics of missing persons, and every year the numbers only increase. A few years ago, one international organization calculated that just in Europe, the two Americas, and Russia, around 1 million people vanish without a trace each year. Today's talk will be about not quite ordinary disappearances that neither criminals, human traffickers, nor special services can be involved with. Because the circumstances of such disappearances are so unusual that they don't fit into the basic logic of any sane person. One thing is to disappear without a trace, without witnesses, and add to the database of missing persons. But it's completely different to literally dissolve into thin air before your own family's eyes. This case became public knowledge back in the 19th century. A certain American farmer named David Lang lived with his family on their own farm in Tennessee. He vanished on an ordinary September day in 1880 before the eyes of the family's friends. That day, David Lang was expecting guests, Judge August Peck and his brother-in-law. The guests drove up to the farm just as Lang's children George and Sarah were playing in front of the house. Seeing his friend, David came out onto the porch with his wife, then left her by the house and headed out to the meadow to meet the guests. He simply dissolved into the air. At first the guest and family thought Lang had fallen into a hole and rushed to help him, but the ground where he disappeared was completely flat. Eyewitnesses to the disappearance and owners of nearby farms searched for Lang for several days, but the search yielded no results. Only in the meadow where Lang vanished did the grass wilt in a perfect 15-foot diameter circle. Lang's daughter Sarah told journalists about her father's disappearance in 1932. The American 19th century writer Ambrose Bierce collected stories about mysterious vanishings. He documented the disappearance of an English cobbler named James Byrne Horsley on September 3, 1873. That day, the cobbler bet his friends that he could run 20 miles there and back without rest. To record his achievement and prevent cheating, the friends Horsley bet with decided to follow him by carriage. The bet was never settled. After running several miles, Horsley suddenly tripped, cried out and dissolved into thin air before his astonished friends. Bierce also wrote about a 16-year-old youth named Charles Ashmore, who vanished after stepping outside for a minute to fetch water. This happened in 1878 near the town of Quincy, Illinois. The head of the Ashmore family, Christian Ashmore, had bought a farm on the bank of a creek that became the main water source for the household. On the evening of November 9th, the entire Ashmore family, Christian, his wife, 2 daughters, and 16-year-old son Charles, were sitting by the fireplace. Charles then got up, took a bucket and went out to the creek to fetch water for dinner. When he didn't return after 15 minutes, his father and Charles's older sister Martha went out following his tracks, which were clearly visible in the freshly fallen snow. They discovered that about 75 meters from the house the tracks abruptly ended, as if Charles Ashmore had been carried up into the air. Similar incidents occur all over the world and Russia is no exception. In 2007, a post appeared on the GAN.ru forum from a militia officer describing a similar disappearance in Russia. In 2005, in a village in central Russia, a 32-year-old woman and mother of 3 went out one evening to fetch water from a pump outside her house and vanished. The pump was located right next to the house. Inside, along with her children, was the woman's elderly mother. She raised the alarm when she found the bucket hanging on the pump, while her daughter's tracks ended right there with no trace of the woman herself. According to the militia officer, the elderly woman had the sense not to trample the tracks and called the station, who arrived at the scene just 20 minutes later. Despite the swift response, the missing woman was never found. Moreover, the officers acknowledged that the woman was not considered at risk. She was dressed modestly and had no money, so she was of no interest to wrongdoers. There were no signs of wrongdoers or vehicles near the pump. And of course there have been many such incidents on battlefields. For instance, on August 23, 1915 near Constantinople, military units witnessed the appearance and disappearance of an enemy regiment in strange dense clouds. But perhaps one of the most famous cases on this topic is the so-called Philadelphia experiment. Interestingly, this incident is also associated with Nikola Tesla, although there is no official confirmation. Moreover, 2 feature films have been made about the incident. So, going back to the date, on October 28, 1943, the so-called Philadelphia experiment took place. The Navy destroyer DE-173, better known as the USS Eldridge, crammed with hundreds of tons of electronic equipment, was docked at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The experiment was then activated. The goal was to generate huge electromagnetic fields that, with the proper configuration, were supposed to cause light and radio waves to bend around the destroyer. So, the powerful generators were switched on and the ship began to be engulfed in a greenish fog. The fog then started to dissipate, along with the ship itself. The result was a complete disappearance. According to some reports, after several minutes, in some cases seconds, the ship reappeared. But something shocking was discovered. It turns out that after the ship vanished from Philadelphia, it reappeared at the shipyards in Norfolk, Virginia, and then returned back to Philadelphia. As a result of the experiment, most of the sailors went insane. Some people completely disappeared and never returned. But the most frightening and puzzling thing was that 5 people ended up fused into the metal hull of the ship. This experiment had a catastrophic effect on the physical and mental state of the people involved. Over the years, interest in the enigma has periodically faded and flared back up again, with new questions arising. Indeed, if the Navy really did intentionally or accidentally achieve invisibility or even teleportation, could the results of such an experiment also explain a number of mysterious events and numerous cases of unexplained disappearances in the area named the Bermuda Triangle? The secret of the Philadelphia experiment remains unsolved, and the definitive answer may lie in the archives of the U.S. Navy. It's possible this is all just a myth and no such experiment ever took place. However, if we consider the large amount of material various people have collected over time, and if the Philadelphia experiment did not happen as it was portrayed, then what really did happen on that distant October day in 1943? Just as the disappearance of huge numbers of people around the world without apparent cause or under strange circumstances remains an unsolved mystery,